But I mean, some people just like to accessorize their gun, and so in that aspect, I get it. But yeah, for a carry gun, nah, no way.
So I had went on a quest in the sense of like what would be the best carry gun. And as you know, I have that tricked out 1911 that I love. I carried that for about a year. I recently found a Sig Sauer Legion P220 in 10 millimeter.
Holy cow!
It has a 5-inch barrel, 8.7-inch slide. It weighs about 45 ounces unloaded. And then my ammo sponsor, G9 Ammo, they make a 145 grain 10 millimeter traveling at 1,400 feet per second.
That's a cannon, dude.
Yeah. So I bought a holster and I've carried it every day. I got it. Yeah, I got it in it's a Wright Leatherworks leather holster. It's inside the waistband. It has a two loop design, but it curves to my body. And I wear it I wear it about 330, but because the P220 is thinner, it's about the same size as a 1911. So it's not a double stack like the 226 or like the Glock 19 or anything. It is thinner. I only get 9 rounds, but 9 rounds of trained 10 millimeter is better than 15 rounds of untrained 9 millimeter, in my opinion.
Well, anything trained is better. We've been lucky enough to work with this guy, Dr. Paul Maurer. He's one of the top neurosurgeons in the world. I mean, he's an absolutely brilliant guy. He doesn't say that he's that smart, but he is. This guy, you start talking about World War II or really anything with this dude, he's probably read 20 books about it, and he actually remembers every single thing that he read in that book. And he's a very, very smart guy. But his big thing is terminal ballistics. What does that round actually do when it hits surface, whether that's a person, or a car door or things like that. And he's one of the best out there. Him and this guy Buford Boone that works for the FBI. They're kind of the two top terminal ballistics guys out there. And so when you sit down and you talk to him about all the terminal ballistics and this and that, and again, he knows why did they make this decision? They made this decision to, like when the FBI said, let's go with the 10 millimeter because of the penetration and things like that. That was all based off of that 1986, I believe, FBI shootout down in Miami.
Yeah.
And a lot of that was based off of the one guy took a round on the transverse plane, kind of like we would shoot a quadruped, he took a round there and it eventually killed him, but he just didn't bleed out fast enough.
Right. It wasn't incapacitating.
Not immediately. And so he took that round, and then I think he walked around the front of a vehicle, and unfortunately, he basically executed one of the FBI guys, and then he ultimately died. But they said, okay, we need a round with more penetration, with more energy, and all these things, because I think they were running like 38 special snub-nosed revolvers or something at the time. So they came up with the 10 millimeter, and then they were like, that's just too much gun for the average agent to handle. Because, FBI agents, lawyers, accountants, car salesmen, I mean, they come from a wide variety of backgrounds, and then they try to get them to qual with these guns, and they have a hell of a time just walking off the street and running a 10 millimeter gun. So that's when they ended up developing the 40 Smith & Wesson, and then full circle, they're back to running 9s.
Yeah.
Because these terminal ballistics guys have explained to everybody that, shot placement is what matters.
Right.
More than anything. A miss with a 10 millimeter is still a miss. You're better off with a hit with a 380 auto with the proper ammo than you are with a miss. And when I say miss, I mean into an area that's not going to cause you to bleed out or something like that. So if you can't control it, I mean, I would rather have somebody shooting a friggin' 22 that they can control and put accurate shots in. I mean, your heart's only sitting about 3 inches below your chest plate. So as long as you put a hole through somebody's heart with a 22, Whew, that's bad
Well,
news, man.
and that's why I think it's important for the training piece. Because you might carry, because I know a lot of guys that they'll carry a 10 millimeter or they'll carry a 357 Magnum, whatever it is, and they're good with that first shot, but it takes them 2 seconds to get the follow-up shot because they're not managing recoil correctly, or because they think the snub nose 44 Magnum is a good concealed carry, stuff like that. So it is important to train with your carry gun, and I think that's a lost thing there is people want to carry a 357 but train with 38 special. Well, what are you going to get in a gunfight with?
Well, yeah, because the truth is that one shot very rarely, or you just don't know. I shouldn't say rarely, because you just don't know what somebody's reaction. You could hit somebody with a slingshot in the arm, and they might be like, all right, I'm out. This was a bad idea. The fight's over, let's say. But you just don't know. You don't know that. And so you can put effective rounds into somebody, but they're not going to be that immediately incapacitation. I mean, other than those shots into the, that box on your face, because basically from your orbital bones down into this, that's just air. People can survive those kind of shots. I mean, they're not going to look as good, but they're not going to be out of the fight, let's say. So that's a hard thing to hit. I mean, when you really think about it, that's a hard thing to hit. People talk about your spinal cord. Well, your spinal cord is really about as big around as your pinky finger. Your spinal column, that's wider, but that's a hard thing to hit. It really is. And that spinal cord stops like at your sternum. It doesn't run all the way down to into your pelvic bone. The column runs, but the spinal cord itself is relatively short, and it's buried behind all this stuff. And so that's a hard thing to actually sever with a gunshot. So you're just looking for, in that effective area, I call it just that high thoracic cavity shot in that range. And so, if you can't control your gun, you take that first shot, it might be a good shot, it might not. If it's going to be effective, but that person could bleed out in 5 minutes. It needs to be probably that 5-7 shots actually into someone. You want to be able to do that as fast as possible without losing your accuracy. But it has to be a gun you can control. And you're exactly right. That 10 millimeter shot that hits some dude up high in the here, and then 4 seconds later you're back on your sights to take another shot. That guy could be on you. They could have run. You just don't know. So, the ability to put multiple rounds into someone as quick as possible, and that comes from being able to control the gun.
And that's it. I mean, it shoots like I think it shoots like a 45. So it's steel framed. It's nice. Next time you're down here, I'll have you shoot it.
I haven't shot a 10 millimeter in a long time.
And I have real 10 millimeter ammo, not the watered down stuff.
Okay. So. but you're absolutely right. People get wrapped around this whole thing about caliber, and they think bigger's better, and it's like, well, it still has to be, if you do the math on the whole thing, the difference between a 9 millimeter and excuse me, a 9 millimeter and a 10 millimeter obviously it's a millimeter in bullet diameter, which if you do it, it's like 0.357 to 0.41 or something like that. So it's not a huge difference when you look at the size of the hole that it creates. So if you can't control that 10, it's not doing you any favors. When trauma surgeons go in and they look and they start seeing bullet holes, they're not like, whoa, man, that was a 45. You know what I mean? It's a 22 through your heart is still a hole through your heart. A 45 through your heart, it makes a bigger hole, sure, but it's placement. It's shot placement all day.
Well, and that's what I tell people commonly is I try, for me, what is the biggest round I can control the most, because you have a pistol anyway, and in a gunfight I'd rather have a rifle.
Right.
So I mean, so what's the biggest one I can control to the same level as, let's say, a 9mm or whatever it is.
Right.
Too many people think that their handgun is what's winning gunfights. Well, there's a reason why military, that's not our first choice.
Well, if you look at like the energy level of a handgun, and you look at the charts, and it's even like a 9 as opposed to a 10, it's really energy wise, it's really not that different, and the effect is really not that different on the person. And then so it's a pretty flat line energy wise, and then a rifle's like whoop, even a small rifle
Yeah.
has so much more energy than a handgun does. So like when they talk about hydrostatic shock and you see the round go into those ballistic gel tests, and it's like creates this big boom, and then it comes back down. Well, that big wound cavity, that doesn't actually cause, not out of a handgun, that really doesn't cause any damage, because your heart and your lungs, they all day long, they contract and expand and contract and expand. So they can take that big shock wave of energy, expand, and then come back down. Your liver can't take that. You can tear someone's liver, but I don't know if you can even tear someone's liver with a handgun round. With a rifle, absolutely. You can cause that and tear someone's liver, and they can bleed out from that liver wound. But yeah, it's really just what the bullet hits. And so if you see, a guy that's 230 pounds, he's on the 50-year-old HGH diet kind of exercise program, you're
Yeah.
like, dude, it just, you're not really fooling anybody, bro. I know what you're doing. But a guy that has that tremendous amount of strength, and he's running a 45 or a 10 or something like that, and they're just, in absolute control of that gun, and people think, oh, I can do that too. Well, if you have the available grip strength to be able to do that, you can. Like, I mean, for me, like I said, I'm 5'11", 165 pounds. I don't have the grip strength to control a 10mm to the same capacity or ability that I can control a 9. I just don't. It's not going to affect my accuracy, because again, my sight alignment, sight picture, I'm in control of the trigger. I'm not going to take that shot until I'm ready. But the time between those shots for a 10 or a 45 for me compared to that 9, yeah, it's going to be different. It'll be 0.4, 0.5 as opposed to maybe 0.2, 25.
Yeah.
So, in a fight that from beginning to end may last 4 or 6 seconds, that quarter of a second per shot adds up, and it turns in 4 shots in a quarter of a second per shot. That's a full second. So if you can get more rounds off effective into that person, create those wound channels, you have a better chance as opposed to carrying that giant cannon and maybe getting one shot off. But
right. And that's something I've noticed too, is there's a lot of instructors, or not even just instructors. What are they? Influencers. That's what we'll call them.
Yes.
That they tell people, well, you should carry this gun or this gun only and nothing else.
To say hi. What's up?
Yeah. It's a guest. But what they don't understand is, I've met a lot of students out here that they can't carry a, whatever it is, a Glock 19, or that's an older lady and she cannot rack the slide of a Glock 19, even though I've heard multiple people say everyone can rack the slide of a Glock 19. I know a couple people who can't, and I've tried it because I tried to convince them they could.
Right.
So what works for me might not work for everybody. So what I try to find is, what are the reliable choices for everybody out there? I had a student come to a class. Thankfully, they brought 2 guns, but they brought one, and the firing pin broke in half. So I've never seen that before.
Was it an XD?
No, I wish it would have been.
I've seen some XD firing pin break. I've seen that before, but
it was a Taurus Spectrum. It was a little 380. It broke in half, and I was like, "Oh, I've never seen that." But thankfully, they had a second gun, and it was a Smith & Wesson Shield.
Okay.
Well, if I was, because I've heard other people say it, but if I told them, "Oh, well, both these guns suck," It doesn't help them because those are the guns they have. You know what I
Right.
mean? We need to
Yeah.
train them on how to shoot what they got.
Mhm.
So that, do you have anything to add with that before we go to the next question there?
No, just yeah, you got what you got. You got to find a way to work with what you have. I tell people I can't make you any stronger today. I can show you little things you can do to work on your grip strength that'll over time allow you to control that gun much better. But even just getting people's hands in the right place
Yeah.
makes a huge difference. And we've shot together, and you've seen me with other students constantly harping on people with their grip, your grip, because that's what allows you to control that gun. And yeah, you have to have a gun you can control, but yeah, you have to have proper mechanics to control really any gun.
Yeah.
But no, that's it. No.
Well, I think we were both initially taught is when you place your finger on the trigger, it has to be the pad of your finger.
Yeah, that was a big thing for a long time, and there's some people that are still teaching it.
They are.
And
So I recently I did it in a class, and then I said, hey, we should film this so that way I can put it on YouTube. And I put my finger all the way through the trigger guard and did the correct grip, did the correct rearward pressure to the trigger, and it hit dead center. And I said,
right.
it has nothing to do with where your finger's at. It has to do with the motion to the trigger and making sure you have the right grip.
Right. Well, you're better off having that gun in the right position in your hand,
Right.
and your finger just lands where it lands. Because we all have, I mean, people think, oh, you have big hands or you have small hands. Well, and everybody does have different size hands, but it's not just the hand, it's the length of your fingers. Some people have long fingers and a short palm. Some people have giant palms and giant long fingers. So there's this mix and mash of your hand that, the ratios are different from everybody too, to fingers to palms and all that kind of stuff. So, you and I could have the same overall length, shoot the same gun, and where my hand lands and your hand lands on that gun and your finger lands on that trigger could be completely different.
Yeah.
And so to me, the only thing that I don't want people to do is like for, these safe action triggers and stuff is to have such little finger on that thing that they're not engaging that safety, or they have their finger so far in there they're getting into their support hand grip. But other than that, to me, I could care less. And I've never seen, because like you look at the mechanics, the mechanical device, which is the gun itself, that trigger's not on a ball joint. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It really only goes in one direction, backwards. 1911s obviously are better because that trigger, it has a trigger bar and it's in a channel, and it really can only go
backwards.
Backwards. But even a Glock or a SIG and these triggers, you really just go backwards. That's it. So it's your grip. Again, that left and right stuff, it's your grip. It's your grip. It's not that trigger finger. And I think that's one of the big kind of things that is still being taught that I wish would go away.
Yeah.
The more things you give somebody to think about, the harder anything is to do. And especially when they're thinking about something that ultimately really has no effect. You're just wasting brain energy trying to worry about the placement of this finger. Who cares?
Yeah. I had a wordy discussion with an instructor. It's down here because they had a name for everything. Like the grip was called the master grip. The stance was called the Kung Fu stance, or so. They just had their own names for all their stuff. It wasn't really Kung Fu stance, but
but I know what you're saying.
They're trying to market themselves and doing it through all that. But it's like, man, when you get these students up here, you're confusing the crap out of them because they don't know they don't understand. One, they're not understanding the process. So they came to you to learn it. And now you're making them learn like 6 or 7 things on top of each other. Just grip the gun. Just grip the gun.
Right. Yeah. I try to explain to people, that you do want that the back strap of that gun,
Yeah.
whatever, or the slide to land basically right in line with that V and kind of run back into your forearm. But that's it. I mean, that's not overly complicated.
Right.
Master grip. I don't know. I mean, yeah, people that try to come up with a new term for, the same thing. I didn't call it a circle. I called it a wheel or a steer.
Yeah.
Does it really do
Yeah.
anybody any good
Yeah.
to have all these kind of weird names associated with it, with the grip? I just kind of like, well, you're either doing it right or you're doing it wrong. I don't have a special name for anything. It's kind of like when you want to shoot, strong hand only, weak hand only. Well, what do you call it when you shoot with both hands together? I don't know. Two hands together.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Two-handed grip.
Yeah.
I don't have some cool name for it. It's that good two-handed grip. So that's what I call it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, I call it a master grip or dynamic grip, or my big one that I laugh about is the reloads. I can't even keep them all straight. There's the tactical reload,
Right.
reloads with retention, speed reloads, combat reloads,
Administrative.
administrative reload. It's
Yeah.
like, dude,
Yeah.
what? I use one reload style, and that's the one that I don't care, about. Well, is this the situation I want to do a tactical reload
Yeah.
with retention, or just a tactical reload? What?
So what I say to people for that is, what is the worst scenario that you'd have to reload your gun? And they said, well, in a gunfight. I said, so what do you think would give you the most practice to reload in a gunfight? Do the same reload every single time that you would probably do in a gunfight. Don't do anything else. Just do that one. Because if you don't do anything, let's say you shoot once a month, that's a lot of reloads you could do.
Yes.
But if you're sitting here practicing taking it out of the gun, laying it on the table, or taking it out of the gun and putting it in your pocket, how do you know that due to muscle memory or whatever? I know you don't believe in muscle memory. I heard your speech on that in class.
I don't.
But how do you believe that if you do something over and over, you wouldn't do that in a fight?
Well, exactly, and that's like you did say I don't believe in muscle memory.
Right.
And
I meant mental.
Right.
I didn't remember the term you used, but yeah.
Well, how many neural motor pathways do you want in your body for reloading the gun, kind of thing? I want one, because under that stress, your brain is going to take the pathway of least resistance. So if you shoot at a range and all you ever do are these administrative reloads, that's the one you're going to do under extreme stress, because that's the clearest pathway your brain has. So I'm the same way. I like one style of reload.
Yeah.
That's the one I do. I'm a slide lock release guy. I do that with every gun that I shoot. That's how I put my slide back forward. And I'm not gigging people for using other methods. I do think there's some flaws with the other methods. They're not as infallible. I don't even know if that's a proper word, but
that's fine. I'm not a dictionary. It's fine.
Okay. But there are mistakes you can make with the other ones. I think the slide lock release is as foolproof and as efficient as anything else that's out there. So that's the one that I use. I don't have different ways to do that stuff, because again, I want to have that pathway as clear as possible. And so that's the way I use that one method. I've seen people, over the top. I've seen people miss their slide. I've seen people miss it.
Yeah.
So, and then the amount of movement you're inducing that is slower. It's slower. Can you do it extremely fast? Absolutely. But you're inducing more movement than you have to. Than if you do, if you practice something that has a lot of movement in it, you can maybe get it down this fast. But if you practice something that has less movement and you practice it a lot, you're going to be faster. It's just the way mechanics work. So I use the golf swing analogy a lot in that, and I don't know if you've ever are a golfer, but people make fun of golf all they want.
Yeah.
Athletically, golf is extremely, extremely difficult. And I don't think most people realize that until they've actually gone out and tried to play golf. But it's so hard because there's so much movement involved in a golf swing. It's extremely hard to repeat. So I want to have as less or as little movement as possible in whether it's a mag change, it really in anything that I do. I want to minimize the movement. I want it to be as efficient as possible. So when I'm practicing it, I'm practicing the most efficient way possible. So when I ever have to use it, it's,
right there. Yeah.
It's a clear pathway.
Right. And I think what's funny is when people give an argument for using the slide release, slide lock option, right? They'll say, well, do you think under that stress you'll be able to do it? But those same instructors teach that you can change a magazine. So they can find the magazine release, but they can't find the slide lever.
Lock release. Yeah, that argument doesn't hold up to me either.
Yeah.
And I mean, I would argue that pulling a trigger to the rear is a fine motor skill.
Yeah.
And I honestly, that's a clear definition of what is a fine motor skill and what is a gross motor skill. That's been a kind of a really hard thing to nail down. You're a product of your training. You're going to do what you've trained yourself to do. I mean, there's things, again, back to that FBI shootout in Florida. There were stories, and I've never confirmed this, that they found some of those guys that had brass in their pockets.
Yeah,
because
I did hear about that.
It was in their process. So they had done it so many times. This was like probably 2002 time frame. I was actually in 19th Special Forces Group in the Guard, out here in Colorado. I wasn't a Green Beret, but I was in college doing ROTC. They put me in this National Guard unit. The idea was to kind of learn how to be an officer. So I was like, well, if I'm going to go in a National Guard unit, I want to go in one that I'll be around guys with kind of similar mindsets. So yeah, I was in 19th group, but to be clear, I was not a Green Beret. But we were doing some hand-to-hand stuff, and the instructor told this story that a guy was involved in an actual hand-to-hand situation, and the guy pulled a knife or pulled a gun on him. This dude took that away from him, took the weapon away from him, but he had done it so many times in training, and he'd always handed the gun back to the instructor to do it again. And that this guy, I mean, again, this could be a complete bullshit story, but he told it to us, and that this guy took the gun away from the attacker or the knife, whatever it was, and he went to hand it back to the attacker. And the attacker was like, kind of freaked him out, and he ran off like, what the fuck is this guy doing?
Yeah.
But he also freaked the instructor out because he was like, why in the world would I do that? And he goes, because you had trained yourself to do that. Under extreme stress, your brain and your body is going to take the most established pathway that's there, and that's what you're going to do. You're a product of your training. So if you train to hit that slide lock release, that's what you're going to do. And like I said, I've seen people miss the slide coming over the top.
Yeah.
I've seen people that drop their slide with their strong hand. I've seen people drop that slide before that mag was completely seated. So there are little things that you can do that you can miss, that you can screw up with these other methods, that they're not as foolproof as they've kind of been made out to be. But if I seat that mag with my weak hand and I run my slide forward with the slide lock release, I know that mag is seated. I know my slide now is forward. My hand is right there. It's easier for me to get back into that same position with my grip than it is to come over the top, run that thing to the rear, and then reestablish that grip, and then present the gun back out. So yeah, I like to have kind of as close to a foolproof method as possible, and then that's the one that I use.
Gotcha. Yeah.
You got to know how to clear different malfunctions, but do you really need to have 5 different ways to reload the gun?
No, I don't. Yeah, I try to keep it as simple as possible.
Right. You might want a method for doing it with one hand, excuse me, if you're down to strong hand only or weak hand only, well, how am I going to reload the gun now? Well, yeah, you need to have a method for that because the other one's not going to work.
Absolutely.
But even for those, I have one way to do it. That's the one that I run with.
There you go. Let's see. In your opinion, what is the main reason that an individual should get firearms training?
Because it's a hell of a lot harder than people think it is. It really is. And when you take the complexities of having to use a gun as a civilian or in that kind of civilian defensive situation, it's an extremely difficult thing to do. And if you don't have any training for that, you'll see it. You see these law, and I don't mean to pick on law enforcement because they have an extremely difficult job. But when you look at these shooting numbers and things like that come out of law enforcement, they can't shoot for shit. And it's not it is their fault, but it's more the fault of their department than anything else because they don't give them the time or the resources to shoot. And they don't want to put them into these newer ways of thinking style courses because everything has to be approved and signed off on by the chief of police and and all these things. And again, that's because they're all afraid about getting sued. But even the guys and the girls doing the job, they need to have better training because if you look at their hit ratios, they're terrible. I mean,
well, and that's even if you look at some of the qualifications that they do, it's not even situations that they find themselves in for shootouts. And I think it's fine. I heard this. I haven't verified this statistic, but I had heard it before. Where back in the 50s, the total number of shots it took for one cop to take down one suspect was 5 to 6 rounds. Well, the guns they were carrying were revolvers that had 5 to 6 rounds. So they shot the gun until it was empty. Well, in today's world, they're doing the same thing, but the difference is they have 17 rounds. I think it's looking at, do you want the individuals that are coming to train you to have only qualifications as an experience or coming to save you in situations when you call the cops, right? Something that I have seen, which I make light of it, but I'm not trying to talk crap. I say all the time, if I want to know what a gun is like in a holster, I will ask a cop. If I want to know what it's like shooting the gun a bunch of times, I'm going to ask somebody that shoots their gun a bunch of times, but most of the time, it's not cops.
It's not. And like I said, it's not really their fault. It's the nature of what they do. They spend the majority of their time learning how to properly police the community that they serve. And there's, and I get that to some extent. The truth is they're probably not going to really ever deploy their firearm. But when you look, that guy, Dr. Maurer, he has a lot of research done on shooting and the hit ratios for the NYPD was crazy. I mean, it was like from 0 to 2 meters. I think the hit ratio was like 40%. And that's just making contact with the body, not an effective shot at all.
Within 6 feet.
Right. And so what does that mean? It means that they're just not properly trained. And then, it is hard to knock the police, but at the same time, you're right. It's the people that train, the people that shoot their guns a lot are the ones that shoot them well. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. So, and that's absolutely. Another thing that I talk about pretty often is individuals that take license to carry classes, and they call that training. Something that I remind them of is you're shooting a qualification. So the same way that I can't say law enforcement officers train when they shoot qualifications, that's the same thing for you. And you're only doing it once. They do it at least every 6 months. Right. Because I know a lot of people that'll say, well, I don't need to take training because I have my license to carry. Okay, well, you got a license to drive your car, right? Yeah. Have you not drove your car in about 6 months? Well, no, I drive it every day. Same thing with a gun. Just because you have a license doesn't mean you're actually going to know what to do with it.
Well, it's like saying I have a Formula One car in my garage. I'm a Formula One driver. No way, dude. No, you're not. You're absolutely. You're not even close, dude. You know, and you know, one of the analogies that I try to use to explain to people that if you really look at, pure hostage rescue style units, within the United States, or, the SAS, Delta, the FBI, HRT, these guys that, that's like their number one job is to be able, or they're the guys that are going to get the call to do an actual hostage rescue. Now, why do they shoot so much? Because it's that hard to
Yeah.
do it. The chaotic situation that they're going to find themselves in, to be able to make those shots to hit the bad guys and not the good guys, when good guys are freaked out and running in all these different directions. You're talking probably like less than 1,000 guys, that are really that good, that you would be like, okay, I feel comfortable. Well, not that you feel comfortable with it, but if you were a hostage, and they said, okay, you get to pick the unit that's going to come rescue you, you're probably not going to pick the local sheriff's office, their SWAT team that trains once every couple months
Yeah.
to come and get you. You're going to pick CAG, HRT, Ranger Regiment, the SAS, somebody along those lines. That's who I want coming to get me. And how often do those guys shoot? They shoot all the time. They're held to an extremely high standard. And why do they shoot that much? It's not just because they enjoy it, which they do enjoy shooting, but at the same time, they shoot that much because that's what it takes to be that good. And when you say, okay, as an individual in a defensive style shooting scenario, how good do you need to be? You a lot better than you think you do, because who are you trying to protect? Yourself, your wife, your kids? Are you in your house? Are you out in the street? Are you in a public place? Is it a react to active shooter situation? You're going to have all kinds of mass chaos, and you might get a glimpse of this shooter and you don't have the ability to take that shot and put them down. So how many more people are they going to kill before somebody else shows up that can make that shot? If you look at that gentleman in the shooting in Texas at the church.
Yeah, Fort Worth. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was an incredibly difficult shot. He hit that dude right in the head, I think 18 yards.
Yeah.
From beginning to end, the whole thing was over in, I think, 6 seconds. And that's a lot of chaos going on. The guy made a tremendous shot. My hat's off to him. If I ever was around him, I'd buy him a drink and say thank you. I mean, he saved a lot of people's lives. But you look at his background. He wasn't just somebody that had a gun and, like you said, had taken a CCW course.
Yeah.
He was a shooter. He was a guy that shot almost his entire life, or his adult life. He really knew what he was doing, and he was able to take that shot. So that's why I would tell people, you really need to take courses and to learn from other instructors. I mean, there are bad instructors out there. You see some of them on YouTube, and part of me thinks that their whole shtick is just that they're terrible, and people go watch it for being funny. Or at least I hope that's the case, because otherwise,
like a comedy routine.
Exactly. I just hope to God they're not actually putting out this information to people. But I've heard stories from people that have taken courses with guys that on paper, or most shooters would think, I would love to take a course from that instructor. And that some of the things that instructor has said, you're like, that's the dumbest shit I've ever heard.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you can learn from anybody. You might be learning how not to do something, but to take some real shooting courses is extremely important. I mean, I've taken multiple courses. I've gone through multiple training programs, let's say, or whatever you want to call them, for shooting. Obviously being in the Army, spent a lot of time behind machine guns and rifles. Didn't spend a lot of time with a handgun. And so, I knew how to shoot, and I was decent, and I'd been around some of the best shooters, instructors there were, but I wasn't really good with a handgun until, I started to learn from guys that were good with handguns. And,
Right.
and it was a process. It's not, you can go take one course from, I mean, come take one of my classes, or with me and Chris, come take one of your classes, or go take a class with John McPhee, Bob Keller, Pat McNamara.
Yep.
I mean, guys that are proven to, instructors that have the resumes, have the backgrounds, and you go take a course from them, you're going to walk out of there better than when you went in. But if you don't keep going to the range and keep practicing what those guys taught you or what I taught you, you're going to lose the ability to do it. So you do need to take good instruction from good instructors, and you need to continuously put that information into practice and train, because it's not like riding a bike. It's not like, oh, I knew how to do it when I was 6, I can do it now.
Right. And that's something I'll say to guys that are prior military or prior law enforcement. I don't care what you did yesterday. What are you doing today?
Right.
Is I go and take training courses so I know it's a practice. So if I go and take a training course with Battleline, or I go and take it with, Pat McNamara, whoever it is, I'm now taking whatever I get from their course and I'm putting that into my range sessions when I go and practice.
Yes.
And then something I've heard other instructors say, but when people say, well, why do I need training? I look at it as, if you were developing criteria that you wanted a security team, like you're going to hire a security team for your family, what criteria would you have them have? Well, I'd want them to be X, Y, Z, Z. Okay, well, that's what you should do, because you're not going to hire anybody to save you. And then that kind of.
I don't have that kind of money,
Yeah, right. Yeah. So,
I mean, I've known a lot of guys that have done protection to high wealth individuals, in the United States and things like that. And yeah, I mean, most of those guys have a background that when you would read it on paper, you'd be like, okay, that dude's legit. He's done protection before, in real protection, there's I call it like people movers kind of thing.
Yeah.
Where some famous singer going through this really big crowd, and you have this just giant man just creating this, pathway for them to walk through. They're just moving people out of the way. And to me, that's not actual protection. The protection aspect of things is, the majority of it is planning, knowing where to avoid and how to get from point A to point B, doing site surveys and having advanced teams and all these things. Not just that big dude who's the intimidator out front. It's all the work that goes on behind the scenes to really be a good protection person. But again, at the end of the day, they might have this resume, but can they shoot?
Right.
Can they shoot? The worst scenario has come true, and that means that you've drawn a gun. Can you put that thing into practice properly? And if you look at the guys that are on those teams, they are guys that shoot.
Right.
It's not, oh, I was great 10 years ago. It's who are you right now that matters.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll get into just we got 2 questions left here. So what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see students make in your courses that they could have prevented prior to the course?
That's kind of difficult, because you just don't know what path they went down to pursue some sort of education. And you don't know what you don't know until you realize that. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so it usually means somebody has shown you what you were doing is wrong. And so that's hard. I think one of the biggest things we see that I wish we could correct is more along the lines of gear. People show up with some pretty janky holsters.
Yeah.
And it just makes you cringe. You're like,
Yep.
oh, man. I essentially run. We work with this guy John, former Marine, makes holsters. Goliath. I think it's Goliath Tactical. and he makes Kydex holsters. Great holsters. I'm more of a leather guy for inside the waistband. Outside the waistband, absolutely, I'm running a Kydex system every single day, all day. No, never think twice about it. And that's what I buy from John, or those Kydex holsters. He makes inside the waistband holsters, but for me, being so skinny and bony, Kydex on my skinny hips and bones and stuff, I don't find it overly comfortable. But so I prefer a good leather holster for that. And I usually will buy from that guy, John McPhee, the sheriff of Baghdad, whatever nickname he's going by these days.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of his, he calls them condom holsters, and they're made out of leather and things like that. So I do wish people would do some more research into their holster choice before they came to the course, because a lot of, they'll go and buy some nylon piece of junk from Cabela's or Bass Pro Shop, and then you see them fighting with that gear a lot in the course. And when you're fighting with that gear, your brain is kind of focused on this janky holster that you have, as opposed to the actual shooting and the weapons manipulation drills. We try to bring a couple extra holsters for people for more of the common handguns that you'll see in a course, but yeah, get a good Kydex holster, or get a good leather holster.
Yeah.
And because when you're fighting your gear, and same thing with slings, with the rifle courses, people they'll have a sling and they don't know how to use it properly and things like that. And again, now they're fighting with their equipment as opposed to learning, and it's a big distraction. So that would probably be my biggest thing is, email your instructor ahead of time and say, hey, when you says good quality holster, what do you mean? Or where can I find a good quality holster? And I'll send you John's email at Goliath, or say, hey, if I would recommend people get a Kydex holster initially and use that, and if it's comfortable for them, stick with it.
Yeah.
But if
I'll tell you what I did is so on all my course all my course outlines that go out, I have quality holster, quality belt. And then what I have below in paragraph is go watch my YouTube video. So I have a YouTube playlist that has videos on there saying what a quality belt, quality holster is that I've made. So that way, before they even come take my class, I'm already showing them this is what a quality holster looks like. So don't go buy the $20 Etsy Instagram maker holster.
Yeah.
Because there's a reason why it's $20. Here's a good list of them.
500 models.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not one size fits all. But those, and then even what I've seen too is guys coming to classes, and for me, it could be different for you. I hate when their magazines are not loaded. It's like a personal pet peeve. Come to the class with your magazine loaded. At least for my classes, come with your magazines loaded.
See, that honestly, that one doesn't bother me. Maybe now that you pointed it out, it's going to bother me. But I think a lot of people do that because they think there's going to be that every course of fire is going to have a specific round count to it.
Yeah.
And so they don't want to preload their mags, so that they think, I'll have to download them and have, one mag of 5, one mag of 7. You know what I mean? And usually when people say, what do we need in our mags? I'm usually just like, top them off.
Yeah.
I usually don't run round count specific drills.
Yeah.
Or if it is a round count specific drill, I'm not really worried about you running dry. This is 12 rounds. I don't care if you have 30 rounds in that mag or 17 or whatever.
Yeah.
We don't run mag change specific drills because it takes so much time to set them up. I'm just like, if you run dry in a course of fire, do a proper mag change, get back to business.
Finish the drill. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, hey, I appreciate that. That was actually the last question I have. I appreciate you sitting down and doing the interview with me. Guys, I'll put the Battleline Tactical website and the Morgan Timing Systems website and Instagram pages in the description. And I appreciate you guys watching. As always, stay tuned for more. Sarge out.